Welcome to Good News from St. Andrew's, Guelph. I'm your host, the Rev John, and it is my pleasure each week to be able to be with you and to have a conversation with you about some of the interesting things that either we're connecting with here at St. Andrew's, Guelph, or to ask some of these big questions that we might have. And some of them aren't so big, but just our curiosities and wonderings. Sometimes we're just trying to explain things that go on that many in the Christian tradition probably take for granted. And if you ask them and they were to be honest, they might not know for sure why we do what it is we do. But I'd love to know what your questions are. I'd love for you to send me a question if you have one. My email address is revjohn, REVJOHN, at standrewsguelph.com, or you could send something through the Rogers viewer response line. We'd love to hear from you, even just if it's just to say, hey, thanks for putting this on each week, or I'm not sure. Could you guys change this a bit? We'd love to have your feedback. We'd really, really appreciate it. But most of all, I would love to hear the kind of questions that you have about your encounter with the Christian church, your encounter with wonderings about who Jesus is, or even just the big thing, the divine, who is God, or just practices that you've heard about and you'd just like to learn a little more about. I'd love to be able to answer the questions that you have here in this episode that we do each week. So today, we've been journeying as a part of the Christian tradition all the way since Shrove Tuesday, Pancake Tuesday, Monday, not Monday, Mardi Gras, thank you. Mardi Gras, we have been beginning what we call the season of Lent. It starts on Ash Wednesday. And for some of you, you may be aware a bit of Ash Wednesday. Essentially, people get some ashes placed on their foreheads, and there's some words that are shared, a bit dark, but words that are like, remember that you are dust, and to dust you will return. It's meant to mark us in a way, remind us of our mortality. Not that we need reminders of that all the time, but during Ash Wednesday, that's kind of the beginning of Lent. Supposed to have a big party on Tuesday night, clean out your pantry, and then begin the season of Lent in a kind of very somber, reflective, deeply spiritual way. The tradition of Lent actually comes from a word in Old English, we think, or maybe some other older language a couple of millennia ago that just got shortened down to Lent. And Lent essentially means the spring season. It's that time of year of spring, so not surprising. As long as you're in the northern part of our hemisphere, that's going to work for you. Spring, Lent. And it was marked by 40 days. And if you've connected with the Bible or heard Bible stories at all or heard any kind of maybe something of a song or something, you know that 40 is an important number in the Bible. The flood, Noah flood story, 40 days and 40 nights. And there's a number of stories in the Bible around 40 about times of fasting. And in the Bible, sort of fasting and being apart. And fasting would be not eating for a time. So Lent is a season of 40 days meant to imitate the 40 days that Jesus spent in the wilderness, not a forest, but in a desert, but they called it the wilderness. A time of fasting and praying, and just deepening Jesus' connection with the divine over that 40 days, and also a time of temptation for Jesus as well. The stories in the Bible talk about that kind of temptation. So for people in the early church, and it started, they made it more official around 325-ish. It's when the Roman Empire essentially begins to bring Christianity as its state religion. And so they wanted to make sure that certain things were in place and practices were put in place that people would do as traditions. And so during that 40-day period, and if you're good with numbers, you'll be able to count from Ash Wednesday to Easter Sunday. It's more than 40 days. Very good for you, gold star. That's because in the season of Lent, we only count the days, not Sundays. Sundays are eliminated from that time because those are meant to be sometimes referred to as little Easters. So 40-day season taking a break on a Sunday to celebrate Little Easters. You are to fast, you are to pray, and you're to give generously to those around you. It's a time of penitence is the word that's often used, a time of self-reflection and trying to build a deeper connection with God. Now, they think that this tradition was something that went on for several centuries, but then kind of got lost, as is true with many traditions. So they think that probably around the 9th century, most Christian traditions weren't following it as strictly as it was introduced way back when. And certainly that's true for us today. In many of our other Christian denominations within the Catholic Church, the Anglican Church, the Orthodox tradition, Lent isn't as strict as it used to be. And certainly around the whole fasting experience within the Christian tradition, not too many traditions follow fasting as strictly as it was instilled a couple of millennia ago. But it's meant to be this time when you're reflecting on your relationship with God in prayer. So prayer, talking to God, trying to get a connection with the divine God. It's also meant to be a time of fasting, so a time of trying to take away some of the distractions in your life, like food and other kinds of things, and get a little closer to who you are within yourself. And the third part is about connecting with your neighbors and trying to, respond to that phrase of like, do unto others as you would want done, or love your neighbors as yourself. And so it's meant to be also a time of generosity as you're able towards your neighbors, being kind to them and offering your love to them as God has loved you. In the early tradition, it was a time for candidates who wanted to become Christians. So they would spend this 40 days and then be baptized on Easter. And we talked about baptism a little while ago. It was also a time connected to a couple weeks ago when we talked about communion that you'll remember, if you'd seen that episode, that I said that people would be refused communion. You weren't allowed to participate at the table. You couldn't get the bread and the wine because you had done something, a grievous sin of some kind. You had violated the rules. You had broken the commandments in some way. And so if you wanted to get back to the table and have access to the table, this Lenten time was a time that was acknowledged that if you did the rituals and the rites and the practices and the penitence of Lent well, then you may be admitted back to the table and restored in your relationship with God and the community around you. Very traditionally, way back when, people would literally put sackcloth, which literally means what it means, a sack that was probably used for potatoes or vegetables or something. You would take that cloth, put a hole in it, and put it over your body, and you'd wear it so it was itchy and awful and felt terrible. And then you'd also take ashes from the fire, not hot ones, hopefully, but you'd take ashes from the fire and just put them all over yourself, and you'd look quite something. But it was meant to be a way of reminding yourself that you are dust and dirt, and you are truly being humble before the divine. And this is all part of the practices that happened. Over time, we've probably transformed it, and even within the community itself, in the culture of today in North America, you'll hear about people giving up things or taking up things for Lent. So giving up coffee for the period of Lent, or not eating too much sugar over the period of Lent. All good and interesting practices. For others, they might go forward with a practice of taking up something. I want to take up something where I'm being more generous to others. I want to do something where I'm going to put something into my life where, whether that's exercise or something. So giving up or taking up things. It's fascinating how something that was traditionally a part of the Christian tradition for centuries, even millennia, then evolves into other things that the culture will transform. A joke I have in my family related to Tim Hortons is it often seemed that the roll up the rim contest would always happen just around the season of Lent. It was really interesting to me if they had timed it that way, or it just happened that it was a part of a rite of spring, certainly as a Canadian. But it definitely always seemed like just when you were about to give up coffee, the roll up the rim contest would come And it would be like, I can't give up coffee now. I mean, I might have a chance to play again, you know? So that's what Lent is all about. That's the journey we've been on. And in the church and in the services, you'll find that the music changes a little bit. It's a little more somber during the period of Lent. A lot of people find it a little more challenging because I think, again, our tradition is, because Sundays have become so important to us as a part of our Christian tradition and our practice, we don't get the experience through the week. So we're trying to give people that experience of Lent on a Sunday, because we're pretty sure that people aren't putting sackcloth and ashes and getting really into the Lenten experience the other 6 days of the week. If we were truly following it in the traditional way, people would be sackcloth and ashes for 6 days of the week, and then they'd come to Sunday and they can sing and delight in the little Easters that are happening throughout that season. So that's why it builds through the season of Lent, that it's a little more somber, a little darker. We're getting closer to what we call Holy Week, and next week I'll talk a little more about what Holy Week's about, and the celebration of Palm Sunday, and then Easter Sunday, as well as Good Friday. So that's what Lent, in a period of a very short period of time, what Lent's all about. And hopefully you're experiencing a Holy Lent in whatever way that is, or you're just a little more curious and you might do a little more digging about what Lent could mean for you in your own way of practicing a relationship with something bigger than yourself, the divine, going a little deeper inside as to who you are, and then also thinking about ways to do justice and act kindly and reach out to those around you in your neighborhood and beyond. This Sunday, it's the recording from the service from March 21st. We're looking at the Gospel of John again, chapter 12 this time, verses 20 to 33. And it's Jesus giving a lesson in germination of seeds, a little bit. And you'll have to come and see what the rest of that story is all about. This is good news from St. Andrew's, Guelph.